About a month ago, I made a video discussing Sin Cara's WWE career and how he botched everything he ever did, feuded with his fake self, and then he was released. But as I mentioned in that video, WWE kept the Sin Cara character going, and behind the mask was Hunico, aka the man who was playing the fake Sin Cara during that storyline, and his time as Sin Cara lasted much longer than the originals, and it was just as chaotic. So like and subscribe and let's talk about it. Let's talk about the failure of the fake Sin Cara in the WWE. The fake Sin Cara, who I guess I should now just refer to as Sin Cara, returned to the WWE on the December 2nd, 2013 Raw, with Hunico of course now under the mask, and whilst he would actually start off with a win streak going into the next year, Sin Cara returned to doing what he was usually doing, and that's just being a body in battle royals and #1 contender matches. And for the first half of 2014, Sin Cara didn't do anything but compete in these and get squashed in singles competition. And in June of that year, he also supposedly got into a backstage fight with Sheamus. The story goes that Sin Cara had beef with Drew McIntyre, and after Sheamus made a jab at Sin Cara about this alleged beef, the two got into an altercation, came to blows, and Sin Cara got the upper hand, sweeping Sheamus's legs and punching him on the way down before it was broken up. So yeah, truly a wild first 6 months back for Hunico as Sin Cara. However, in the summer of 2014, he was sent down to NXT, where he would form a tag team with Kalisto called the Lucha Dragons. The Lucha Dragons would go on a win streak and very quickly rise up the NXT tag division and win a #1 contenders tournament, and they had the title match at NXT TakeOver Fatal 4-Way, and they won! Sin Cara had won his first title in the WWE as himself and Kalisto were now the NXT Tag Team Champions. Whilst in NXT, Sin Cara would still wrestle on the main roster where he was still very much a jobber, but in NXT, he was a god amongst men. But they only held the titles for about 3.5 months, defending against the Ascension and the Vaudevillains before losing them to Blake and Murphy on the January 28, 2015 NXT. And shortly after WrestleMania 31, which took place that year, Kalisto would get called up to the main roster, and the Lucha Dragons would start teaming up on the main roster together. And let me tell you, they did a whole lot of nothing on the main roster, as they were coming in at a time where the tag division was pretty cooked in the WWE, and if you weren't in the title picture, you weren't really doing anything. And it was also during the time where the New Day were just about to enter their record-breaking tag team title reign, so there was no chance of the Lucha Dragons winning the tag title themselves. But they did compete and have the opportunity for the tag titles in multiple occasions. They fought for them inside the Chamber, at SummerSlam in a 4-way match which the New Day won to start their reign, and in a 4-way TLC match that featured that crazy Kalisto ladder spot. At the end of the year, Sin Cara got a shoulder injury and was out for a couple of months. And whilst he was gone, Kalisto would go on a bit of a solo run and would win the US title, and when Sin Cara did return, he would qualify for the WrestleMania 32 Intercontinental title ladder match. So both guys were back to singles action, and the team was effectively disbanded. And of course, in that ladder match, Sin Cara obviously didn't win the title, but that ladder match was awesome. I was a big fan of that match. They should bring it back. Sin Cara was drafted to Raw in the summer, and also that summer, Sin Cara would get himself into a second backstage fight, and this time the fight happened with Simon Gotch, the man who buried Enzo Amore. Apparently the two used to trade digs at each other backstage, and Simon Gotch took it jokingly, but Sin Cara took one of the digs personally, and he blindsided Simon Gotch by throwing a Coke can at his face and then tried to tackle him to the ground before Gotch got him in a headlock. They struggled for a bit, and then the fight was broken up. So yeah, a second fight in the company in just about 2.5 years, and that's all this guy is really known for at this point in the WWE. Because Sin Cara at this point in the WWE was nothing but a jobber, and if he was appearing on Raw, it was only ever to lose. And he did nothing for the rest of the year, other than get into another fight. Are you serious? And this time with Chris Jericho. So in the original story that came from MLW Radio, it was stated that on a UK tour at the end of 2016, Sin Cara knocked out Jericho in the locker room. However, there's a good chance this KO didn't happen, as Chris Jericho wasn't sporting any bruises or marking for the remainder of the tour, and Sin Cara himself did an interview a couple of years ago where he said it was just a little scuffle and the two were fine the next day. Regardless though, Sin Cara is 3-0, undefeated in backstage fights, and that is all I'm saying here. Man, what a beast. And also at the end of the year, it was announced that Sin Cara would be joining the Cruiserweight division. However, this pretty much changed nothing with him in regards to his TV time, as he was still only ever occasionally wrestling on Raw, and that was obviously just a job out, and he was relegated to main event, which was the only show he'd ever get any wins on. In the 2017 Superstar Shakeup, Sin Cara was drafted to SmackDown, and he would have a solid first 6 months in SmackDown, and by that, I mean he appeared only twice for the brand, first to lose to Dolph Ziggler in a quick match, and then as a body in a battle royal, of course, doing what he does best. But in October of 2017, Sin Cara would get a little bit of TV time as himself and the United States champion Baron Corbin would start trading DQ and count-out wins each week on SmackDown. And this would lead to a US title match on the 14th of November SmackDown episode, but alas, Sin Cara lost, and then would go another 5 months without appearing on SmackDown, because of course. His next appearance being in May of 2018, the next year, where he was squashed by Samoa Joe. But shortly after this, Sin Cara would start another program, this time with the newly called up Andrade Cien Almas, and this feud ended at the Extreme Rules pay-per-view, which was his first pay-per-view singles match. It was in the pre-show, but we'll count it, with Andrade of course picking up the win, and a month later Sin Cara announced that he was getting knee surgery and he would be out for an extended period of time. Just kind of unlucky. At the one time he was finally getting a bit of TV time and even a pay-per-view match, injury strikes. He returned 10 months later at Super Showdown 2019 in Saudi Arabia, competing in the 51-man Battle Royal where he actually eliminated Shinsuke Nakamura before being dumped out himself. I think that says more about Shinsuke Nakamura's downfall than his. He wouldn't return to TV until 4 months later when on Raw, he would start a program with Andrade once again. Andrade would beat him twice in singles action, and then would team up with Zelina Vega to take on Sin Cara and Carolina, a female luchador. Like, do you remember Carolina? What a random memory that was just unlocked researching this video. Andrade and Zelina Vega won this match, and afterwards Sin Cara would go backstage and would begin asking the WWE producers what the future plans were for his character, and nobody except Paul Heyman would answer him, who told him that the Sin Cara character was dead, and this was ultimately one of the reasons why Sin Cara would request his release from the company, due to him feeling unappreciated despite being also grateful for his time in the company and wanted to explore elsewhere. He would wrestle his final TV match against Drew McIntyre on the November 11th 2019 Raw, and that was that for the Sin Cara character in the WWE. After Sin Cara left, the character was not continued in the WWE and no new person was put under the mask. It was over. Sin Cara would return to Mexico where he would continue to use the character and the name until renaming to Cinta de Oro, which is still his ring name now. So overall, the run of the second Sin Cara was probably even more uneventful than the first Sin Cara, other than the backstage aspect. All the backstage fights, that is Sin Cara legend stuff right there. And of course, for his entire run, he was botching all along the way, just like the first Sin Cara, but he was definitely better than the first Sin Cara was in the WWE in ring, and was definitely less botchy than him, I would say. And hey, he even had a title reign, so this Sin Cara was definitely the better one in the company.